All right, shalom, shalom. Before I begin this lesson, I want to give all praises, all glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that do rule and teach well. And as always, peace, love, and many blessings unto the elect. All right, it's your brother Itazawan from the GMS Atlanta camp, coming back through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai with another lesson. Lord willing, I do hope and pray that it's edifying. Okay, I'm going to be responding to the elder apostle Gabar's video, which is entitled "You Must Teach That There Will Be Israelites Looking Like Edomites." And in fact, that's true. Okay, because according to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, one of the curses that would befall the Hebrew Israelites would be that we would be scattered among all nations. Okay, now when you go back into the creation, from the beginning, the Lord established man and woman, and He gave the dominion to man. Okay, and when I say the dominion, I mean that He made the man superior to the woman. Okay, so your identity or your gene or your nationality would be determined by the more superior creation, okay, which is the man, because the man holds the actual seed. Okay, a man bears the XY chromosome, and the woman only bears the XX chromosome. Okay, so the man bears the seed and he plants the seed in the woman. Irregardless of what nation that woman is, the seed that woman brings forth is determined by the man. Okay, so because our people were scattered among all nations, the men of our nation were taking wives of the other nations and putting their seed inside of those women, thus creating an image that looked like the other nation. But in fact, the spirit of that particular person would be the spirit of an Israelite. Okay, and vice versa. Okay, if an Edomite planted his seed in an Israelite woman, if an Edomite man planted his seed in an Israelite woman, that seed would probably have a hue to him, maybe a darker complex, maybe has some coarse hair. Okay, but the spirit of that particular individual will be the spirit of an Edomite. Okay, so with that being said, through millenniums of merging with the other nations and planting our seeds in the women of the other nations, you have Israelites who've taken on the physical features of those particular nations. Okay, so yeah, that is something that we have to teach, because in the end gathering, there will be souls that are going to be delivered that are going to look physically like the other nations. Okay, so I want to get a couple of scriptures, and Baba Kusha, watched the elder Apostle Gabar's video. Okay, he was breaking it down wonderfully. Okay, and it's like he said, we must preach this doctrine, because that was a major thing that was happening during the time of Yahushua. Okay, the doctrine of the Gentiles. A lot of people couldn't understand it. Okay, but those mysteries were given unto the elect. So this is Jeremiah chapter 40 and verse 11. All right, it says, likewise, when all the Jews that were in Moab and among the Ammonites and in Edom, and they were in all the countries, okay, had heard that the king of Babylon had left a remnant of Judah, and that he had set over them Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. Okay, so it says what? That there were Jews in Moab, which Moab today would be who you would call the Orientals or the Chinese. Okay, then you have the Ammonites, which would be the Japanese. Okay, which those are the children of Lot. Okay, and it says, and in Edom. All right, so you had Jews dwelling in Edom, and that is the point that I wanted to pull, because you're going to have Israelites or Jews that's going to look like Edomites. Okay, thus you have the Italians, Southern Italians, Sicilians, okay, and those islands throughout that Mediterranean coast. I believe that's the Mediterranean. Okay, see, you're going to have certain Israelites that's going to look like Edomites, but they, in fact, their spirit goes back to the tribe of Judah. Okay, but they look like Edomites because there was a lot of Edomites in the land, and the Moors went into those lands and conquered it and established their seed in the women. Okay, verse 12, it says, even all the Jews returned out of all the places whither they were driven, and came to the land of Judah to Gedaliah unto Mizpah, and gathered wine and summer fruits very much. Okay, so you had Jews that were all over the place, man. And that's recorded all throughout the Bible. As a matter of fact, in the end times, there'll be a great gathering from all the coast of the world. Okay, now this is Isaiah chapter 11 and verse 11. All right, it says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set in his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. All right, so these are all the places that the Lord is saying that he will gather his remnant from in the last days. Okay, this is the second recovery of Israel. The first recovery was what? Was during the exodus of Egypt. Okay, where the Lord protected his seed and delivered them out of the hands of the Egyptians. Okay, now the second time that the Lord is going to deliver his people is going to come by way of what the world called UFOs, which in the Bible they're called chariots. Okay, but notice that this particular scripture speaks about Israelites being scattered among all of these different nations. Because you can't be a Cushite and an Israelite at the same time. You can't be an Elamite and an Israelite at the same time. You can't be Egyptian and an Israelite at the same time. You can only be one or the other. Now, your mother can be of another nation, but that does not constitute your nationality, like this world teaches, like this world pushes. Okay, all the knowledge of this world that's being pushed is contrary to the knowledge of the Bible. As a matter of fact, let me get a quick scripture to prove that point. And that's why the Lord don't care about worldly wisdom. Okay, this is 1 Corinthians 3 and 19. Matter of fact, I'll start at 18. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise. Why? Because, man, when you wake up to this truth, you really realize how much the world has lied to you through their curriculum and through their prerequisites and all of their, man-made knowledge and pseudoscience and things of that nature. You become a fool. You become deceived. You think things are this and it's really not. Okay, and that's why the world does not, Salaki, that's why the Lord does not predicate your understanding based on a worldly perspective. Okay, your understanding must come from a biblical perspective. That's the ultimate form of knowledge. Okay, so this world teaches that you are what your mother is, and the Bible teaches that you are what your father is. So these are two conflicting arguments, and that's why we have to teach it, because this world teaches contrary to what Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua teaches. Okay, it says, verse 19, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness with the Most High. Right. Those different Greek educational systems that they was, had all throughout Greek. Okay, the Greek schools. And it was basically built on mass deception. Okay, because remember, during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, okay, he created a decree that the Israelites were to leave their ways and their laws and their customs and cultures and follow the ways of the Greeks. It was an ordinance. Okay, that's why it tells you in Daniel 8 and 25, through his policies, he calls a craft to prosper in his hand. Okay, so the Greek Empire was full of schools that pushed out deception and Greek mythology and things that were contrary to the ways of the world. Talaki, that were contrary to the ways of the Lord. That's why the Lord said the foolishness, the wisdom of this world is foolishness with the Most High. Continuing on, it says, for it is written, he taketh the wise in their own crafty. Okay, their own craftiness, man. Okay, and that's what's happening right now. So these people who seem to be wise, who have all these degrees and all these different certificates, and they're well decorated in Esau's educational system, a lot of these people are failing right now. A lot of these people are miserable. A lot of these people are in debt. A lot of these people don't have the monetary stability that they went to school to gain. Why? Because it was all a joke. It was all bullshit. And they feel like because they, went to school and got these different certificates and degrees and certifications, then they feel like they have to, work in that particular field. So a lot, and those fields are limited because artificial intelligence, the demand for these jobs are limited. So a lot of people that have the wisdom of this world are really struggling, man. Okay? Which is why we denounce the wisdom of this world. Now, you can find certain tidbits that, are biblically savory, should I say. But for the most part, the wisdom of this world is foolishness, man. Okay? So your nationality is determined by your father. That's a biblical perspective, and it's science. Okay, the word sperm goes back to sperma in the Greek. And when you look it up, it speaks about the gene. Okay? I mean, the word, Salakia, the word gene goes back to sperma. Okay? In the Greek. And that's sperm. That's where your genes come from, the sperm of the man. All right? So the Israelite man can go and lay with the other nations and the women and raise up their seed through the other nations. Okay? Let me turn do not disturb on real quick. All right? So the wisdom of this world is foolishness. So let's go back to the scriptures and bring out another scripture to show that you have Israelites dwelling among multiple nations. Let me see, I believe it's 2 and 5. This is Acts 2 and 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. So how is it that you're a Jew, but you're from every nation under heaven? Okay, see, a lot of Christians like to use this scripture and say that God dealt with, all nations. He dealt with the Jew. He dealt with the Greek. He dealt with the X, Y, and the Z. Okay, but notice it says Jews dwelling out of every nation under heaven. That meaning that they weren't of every nation under heaven that the Lord was dealing with, but it were Jews that were dwelling among the nations in those lands. Okay? So you had Jews coming from all over the place. All right? It's verse 6. It says, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded because that every man had heard them speaking his own language. So they was, a whole bunch of Jews, Israelites, but they were speaking in different languages. Okay? They were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in their own tongue wherein we were born? Parthians and Medes, Elamites, and dwellers in Mesopotamia, and in Judea, Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, in Egypt, and in parts of Libya, about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. We do hear them speak in our own tongues the wonderful works of God. So the Lord was doing a miracle before the apostles when they were speaking. Everybody was speaking in their native language, but they were all hearing it in Hebrew. Okay? Why? Because you had Israelites that lived in these different lands among these different nations. So yes, they would take on certain physical features of these other nations. It's a simple breakdown. But like Apostle Gabar said, a lot of these Israelites lack spirituality to where they make claims and say, well, if it looked like an Edomite and talked like an Edomite, it's an Edomite. Well, that's why the scriptures tell us this. Let's get it. Romans 8 and 16. The Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. So you have certain so-called Caucasian-looking individuals that be more spiritual than certain so-called black individuals. Okay? Or have more flavor, more pizzazz, more style, and and very influential. All right. Why? Because usually they go back to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're Hebrew Israelites. Okay. That's the whole mystery of the Gentiles that the Jews were, having councils over and debating over and falling out over, because you had those Jews that, were foreigners to the Commonwealth of Israel, and they were receiving the same promise as those who were born in the circumcision. Okay? And the ones of the circumcision couldn't understand it because they were living like heathens. All right? But it's a seed thing. Remember, it's not about... The Lord promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's seed that he would deliver them. So the gospel has to be preached to them because they're part of that seed line. Okay? Let me get one last scripture before I head back to the plantation. What was I about to get? Oh, yeah. Ephesians 2:11. It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh, made by hands, that at that time ye were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without the Most High in His world." Okay, so they were Gentiles in past times because why? Because they knew nothing about the circumcision, the customs and cultures of Israel. They knew nothing about it, so they acted as Gentiles. But then when they received the word and it hit them, okay, and they began to believe, okay, then they were able to come into the circumcision. And a lot of Jews just didn't understand that breakdown. Okay, because they were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers to the covenants of the promise. So they had no idea. Just as you have certain so-called white people that look like Edomites, but they don't know anything about this truth. They don't know that they're Israelites. They don't know that the so-called black man are the Jews. They don't know who the world calls Jesus Christ as a so-called black man. They're aliens, foreigners to that knowledge. They're foreigners to the promises that were given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and why it pertains to them. So that's why the gospel had to go out unto them. Okay, having no hope and without God in the world. Yeah, because they're godless. They eat however they want to eat, but yet and still, some of those Gentiles that look like Edomites are members of the elect. Okay. Last scripture, Revelation 7:9. "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues." So a lot of people use that and say, see, all nations, right? But that's not talking about all of the actual natural nations. It's talking about the Israelites that are going to be gathered from among the heathen nations. Okay? And kindreds and peoples and tongues. Because why? Because Jake be speaking them different languages and they look like them, but they see their spirit on their father's side go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? It says, "stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands." Okay, so there's going to be a great gathering throughout the coast of the world that's going to call back the remnant of Israel that are scattered among those nations, whether it's Elam, whether it's Japheth, whether it's Ammon, Moab, Ham, okay, Ishmael. It don't matter. All right, wherever the seed of the elect is scattered, they will be called back through the spirit of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. So I just wanted to put that on on wax, through the spirit, just following up on what Apostle Gabar said. And there's more you can go into dealing with the subject matter. You can bring up points dealing with musicians, actors, performers, athletes. Okay, the list goes on. Okay, and you can see that there are certain Edomite looking people that actually have the spirit of Jake. And a lot of people have never really been able to understand that mystery, but because the mystery was given unto who? The prophets. That's why the scripture says, in the book of Matthew, when the disciple asked Yahushua and said, "Why speakest thou in parables?" He said, "Because the mysteries of the kingdom are for you to know, but unto them they are not given." So the mysteries of the Gentile, the true breakdown that is going into, is truly only given to the prophets, the men of the Lord. So Lord willing, that was an edifying lesson. We want to give all praises once again to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, honors, and blessings to the elect. Shalom.